Hi there. Today I want to talk about one of the topics that I've been pretty passionate lately, and it's about fear. Because if you are like me, you experience fear more or less on a day-to-day basis. And there are some simple fears that you may experience every day. Small fears such as, for example, losing your keys, your alarm clock not working, or missing your bus, losing your job, or asking your boss for a raise, among others. There are many fears. I could do a long list, but that's not the purpose of this video. You may come up with your own fears also. And those are pretty simple situations that we experience regularly. On the other hand, there are fears that are a little bit more abstract. For example, you may be afraid of not being good enough, or failing at your career, being embarrassed in public, rejection, failure. I made a video about failure, you can check it out, while failure equals improvement, and I talked there about the fear of failure, but here I want to make a pretty broad definition. We really need to understand fear in order to overcome it. And eventually, or ultimately, you are afraid of dying. And here I want to make the distinction between the physical death that all living beings experience and a sort of psychological death, and that's your identity. And here I want to be precise that when I talk about fears, I will refer here about psychological fears, in contrast to more biological fears. For example, if you are on a cliff, you will experience some fear that's rooted in your biology. And I don't want to talk about this type of fear, which is more or less common in all animals, or at least big animals. This type of fear is a survival mechanism. Here I want to talk about psychological fears, and those are sort of the more abstract fears that, if you think deeply, those type of fears most of the time won't risk your life. For example, the fear of losing your job. I mean, you are not particularly in a dangerous situation, but it could trigger a dangerous situation, right? It's a more indirect sort of experience. And personally, I think that the topic of fear is extremely important, especially if you are into self-development, because fear essentially will stop you reaching your full potential. I want you to become aware of that. And I was thinking about this analogy that I found pretty interesting, is that imagine yourself, you are on a highway, infinite highway, okay? And you are driving a car alone. The car represents yourself, and you may have a good car, a not so good car, a fast car or slow car, whatever. And the speed of the car, let's say that's how fast you are improving yourself. And again, every person may have different capacities. Your car may be old Volkswagen Beetle, or maybe a Lamborghini, or everything in between. Doesn't matter. The thing is that if you are in fear, it's like pressing the brakes constantly, even though you are alone in this highway. I mean, if your car can go up to, I don't know, 100 kilometers per hour, you are pressing the brake constantly, and you are only going to 50 kilometers per hour. So that's what fear is doing to you, is really slowing your progress and avoiding of is avoiding to you make the full progress you could do in your life. And again, no matter how fast or slow your car is at your present moment, that's something that with personal development you will increase the speed of your car. I mean, personal development is about upgrading your car, that's yourself. But if you are in fear, you are pressing the brake all the time. So no matter how good your car is, I mean, you may have a car that's going to 200 kilometers per hour, but if you're only using it at 100 kilometers per hour, then you're wasting your potential. And that's what fear is doing to you. So I really want to make you aware of many situations probably in your past where you, because of fear, you didn't act, you didn't do what you have to do, and that's stopping you from having a wonderful life. So I guess you want to overcome your fears. You will like to have a life where you don't feel this constant fear of anything. But before that, we need to understand what the hell fear is, right? Otherwise, we won't be able to overcome it. So I have to start explaining what fear is. And again, this what fear is, I don't want here to get philosophical or scientific. I don't want to talk about neurons or brains. I want to talk what fear is in your direct experience, because after all, that's all what really matters. You don't care about neurons or how it's firing. I mean, you really want to understand how fear works in your day-to-day life and how to overcome it. Okay. So we need to understand what fear is, and this is a very personal endeavor. I can explain to you, give you ideas, pointers, but you have to understand that in the end, you have to discover for yourself how fear works in you, because again, I don't know. Maybe you were similar than me, but ultimately I don't know. So all I can tell you is how my direct experience with fear is. Maybe you can relate with this. And then you will have to do your own investigation and come up with your conclusions. After all, personal development is about discovering yourself, not hearing others. I mean, again, hearing others is important, getting pointers, but ultimately you have to do the work. So I will mention this pretty regularly, because I really don't want you to stay just with the theory, but the theory is important. Okay, so what is fear? So first approximation, I mean, I already did this inquiry, so I'm not going to do it in real time, but first approximation of this for me is it's an emotion. When I'm in fear, I feel an emotion. Again, maybe different for you, but for me it's a very intense feeling in my gut, and it feels like heavy there. Also my heart rate may get higher, and it's sort of paralyzing feeling. So you may think of a situation in your life where you, or a recent situation, or maybe you can come up now with something that caused you fear, pretty intense fear, and feel all the emotions, all the sensations in your body that come to you. Maybe different than me, but you will experience something, right? That's what makes you aware that you are in fear. You have a sensation in your body that I guess you should know it. I mean, you experience fear probably pretty regularly, so you know what it is, right? So keep this in mind. So as I mentioned, ultimately fear is a survival mechanism that is rooted in our biology. Basically all living creatures have different mechanisms that alerts the animal, including ourselves, that we're in a dangerous situation. Okay, so if we go to the woods and we see a bear, then we will want to run. So our body is primed for that. And even though here we are talking about psychological fear, the mechanism is more or less the same. So what here is in danger? And again, I want you to become aware of that, is that whatever you are afraid of, ultimately, is your mind trying to protect itself. Because your mind also you can think of as a living organism, your sense of self, your identity. And this identity doesn't want to change. It's afraid of changing because it wants to preserve itself. The same way your body wants to preserve itself, your mind, you, wants to preserve itself. So all the times, every time you feel fear, maybe you are afraid of being rejected by someone, maybe you are afraid of expressing your opinion in public, you may be afraid of what others may think. Notice that deep down is your sense of you that's afraid, that's threatened. You may be afraid of fear itself. Maybe you may feel fear now because we're talking about fear, and all those images comes to you. So, for example, let's say that you are you consider yourself a high achiever. Okay, you want to succeed in life, you want to make money, have a business, whatever, or having a great career. So for you, failing at your career is a big threat to this high achiever character. Or let's say you're a vegan, and every time someone mocks veganism or makes jokes, you may feel triggered. So notice that, or whatever you feel identified with. But here I want to make a very important point, and it's the following. So know that, for example, for a meat eater, someone that, or omnivore, whatever, carnivore, or someone that maybe eats sort of plant-based but is not attached to being a vegan, doesn't take it so seriously, for them this is not any thing of relevance. They don't feel threatened. So the point here that I want to make is that all fear is relative to your identity. There is no absolute fear. For basically almost every fear you can think of that you may experience it, there are people out there that don't have this fear. So there are people that are afraid of flying, but a lot of people are not afraid of flying. There are people afraid of spiders, and there are people that are not afraid of spiders, and so on. I mean, any fear you can think of, there are people that are afraid of it and people that are not afraid of it. So that means that fear itself is not absolute. It's relative, and it's relative to you. Okay, so that's a very important point that I want to make, because if a given situation doesn't threaten your identity, then you won't experience any fear, or you shouldn't. So that's the first point I want to make. And just to tell you a little bit of personal experience. So when I was a kid, for example, I was very afraid of having bad grades. I don't know. Part of my identity was being a good student. And I really was proud of it. So if I had a bad grade, that would be terrible for me. And as a consequence, I tend to study, like overstudy, like read the books like 3 times to memorize everything. I really I took it very seriously, and maybe too much, because I didn't do other stuff. I was just all the time studying. Or for example, until recently, I was quite afraid of expressing my opinions to others, because I was afraid of sounding stupid or whatever, or not the other person not agreeing with me, for example. And that really caused me a lot of resistance. So, and for you maybe this is silly, no? I mean, again, fears are relative. So that's the point I want to make here. So that's the first approximation to what fear is. You have an emotion that's triggered by your identity, ultimately. And I really want you to think about this. Situations where you have felt threatened or triggered, or that makes you jump. And if you go deep down, I will explain an exercise you can do to uncover your fears. You will realize that ultimately is your sense of you that's behind it. So, what is the root of fear? That's the question that I want to address now. So, how fear is created, in a sense? What's the mechanism? And again, this is from a psychological point of view. I don't want to go to the neurobiology, because this is really won't give you any insights. Here we really need to go to the structure in a sort of real concrete point of view, like what's happening to you when you are fear, how this is created. So again, here you need to pay attention, like think, if you remember this, like next time you feel you're afraid, or maybe you can trigger some fear now. So I want you to pay attention. Really, here is all about paying attention to how your body and your mind are working. And if you are like me, you will notice the following. So whenever a situation that triggers fear in you, you get some triggers that produce fear, almost at the same time your mind starts to create a lot of visualizations or thoughts about all situations that can go wrong, essentially. So again, if you are afraid of hesitating your opinions in public, like I was mentioning before, so when you are in a situation where you may want to express your opinions, your mind starts to create immediately images or situations telling you that's not a good idea to do that. So it may start to create images of the other person disagreeing with you or getting angry, or people, if you are in a group, the people being against you and you don't know what to do. I mean, really the mind is pretty powerful and can create all sort of wacky situations where things can go wrong. Or let's say that you want to take a risk in your career, maybe you want to change jobs or even change the course of your career. And if you start to think about it, then your mind starts to come with all sorts of excuses or bad things that can go, that can happen if you take this risk. You may start to visualize, okay, you may gain less money in the other job, or you may get fired, and you may not be able to support yourself, you may get homeless. I mean, all these negative situations. So, and I want you to pay attention here that fears a lot of times, most of the times, are based on other fears. So for example, in the situation that I was explaining, fear of failing at your career, for example, may be based on fear of not being able to support yourself and being homeless. So fears are based on other fears, and those fears are based on other fears, and so on. So in a nutshell, fears work in a sort of recursive structure or recursive way. And not only that, but fears are also support on beliefs. So we may have some limiting beliefs that also support those fears. So in the case of the failing at your career, you may be afraid because also you want to be successful, or you see yourself as a successful person, someone that doesn't fail in life, that wants to be something big. So, or all those are beliefs, right? So we have beliefs and other failures that feed this root belief that we start with. Or for example, you may be afraid of talking to other people, talking to girls or guys, whatever. And you may be afraid of that because you may have the belief that you are not good looking enough, or that you are not good enough, or you are not interesting enough, whatever. So all these beliefs feed this fear. You also may be afraid of being rejected, and so on. So you see, any fear is based on other fears and beliefs, and so on. It's like a tree, the structure. So, and this can create a pretty long tree. No, you can start with any beliefs, and you see that. And I want you to do this the exercise. I will explain at the end, but really I think that's a very good exercise from a theoretical point of view, so that you become aware of your fears and your beliefs. Because again, you may start with a fear A, and this fear A may be based on fear B and belief C, for example. And fear B may be based on belief D and fears E and F, and so on. I mean, this can continue forever. Well, not forever, but and you see that the beliefs, eventually this should end up on all the at the bottom, in a sense. The dead ends should be just beliefs. I mean, all fears ultimately will be based on other fears or beliefs, but you can continue exploring the fears, and eventually, if you do this exploration process, you may end up with a list of beliefs that are sort of the base of the pyramid or the base of the tree. And those beliefs are essentially what makes you, your sense of your identity. So, and that's why, that's what I define as the sense of you, or I, is just a set of beliefs and values. So that's essentially what makes you, no? I mean, you have a set of beliefs and sets of values that make you. So really, you can start with any fear that you may have, a simple fear, and if you go down this route, you may end up with a huge list of fears and beliefs, and that's pretty interesting, because you may realize that, I mean, this thing can go quite deep, right? I mean, any simple fear, like you may start with fear of, I don't know, missing your bus. Why are you so afraid of missing your bus, or getting late to an appointment? And you may start from a simple fear and go down all the rabbit hole with a set of beliefs that make you, and another set of fears that are deep down this base fear. So I will mention this a little bit later about how to perform this exercise, but that's the idea, no? Essentially, you pick a belief and you start going down this route, and you will uncover a lot of other fears and beliefs about you. And you may realize some beliefs that can be quite weird or not really doesn't make any sense, but again, they are quite subconscious, so you don't pay attention to them. And really, this is an exercise about becoming aware of, well, in a sense, who you are, and maybe you want to change some things. But we are going to talk about this a little bit later, when we want to overcome our fears, ultimately. And I want to make a little stop here and mention that a lot of our fears end up in pathological behaviors, because if you're like me, or like most of the people, you don't want to face your fears. It's painful, and I get it, completely understand. So you're trying to run away of fears, and this end up with some pathological behaviors or addictions even, because nowadays it's very easy to get distracted. I mean, there is so much technology and cool things to do, so it's very easy to get distracted, and instead of facing your fears, you hide it. So for example, if you are afraid of talking to people, talking to girls, you may get a dating app because you are not getting rejection there. Or if you are a workaholic, I mean, there are a lot of workaholics out there. You may become a workaholic because, I don't know, your family situation is not very good and you don't want to deal with that, so you spend more time at office. Or you may have some personal issues, you may feel a little bit depressed, whatever, and you end up overworking to try to compensate for that. And there is a pretty common pathological behavior that's people pleasing. Maybe you're a people pleaser, or the opposite of that, that's being an asshole. There are people that are like very aggressive to people, like they are very reactive, you know? But there are people that are really try very hard to please everybody and don't have any enemies. But essentially both are two sides of the same coin. And ultimately you are afraid of who you are, or being who you are, because, or you may be afraid of rejection, of not being liked. Otherwise you would just be who you are, be yourself, but you have to put a mask to compensate for those fears. And we'd end up with a lot of masks, and you see on the street people full of masks. And this in authenticity creates quite a lot of psychological pressure, and you can see that a lot of people are depressed or suffer of anxiety or stress. And of course that's not only not the only reason, but I would say that there is a lot of relationship there. I mean, and keeping all these masks takes a lot of energy. A lot of people nowadays have this problem of not having enough energy, even though they sleep a lot, or they have to drink a lot of coffee. Maybe you're one of them, coffee lovers. I get it. I also like coffee, but if you depend on coffee to survive or to have energy, there is something there. I mean, probably you are spending a lot of your energy in your mind. Maybe you're also overthinking or stuff like that, but I think that a lot of your fears we really don't, we just believe that this is bullshit, but I think that there is some all this psychological energy to keep all these fake personas, because you are faking it, because you are not being authentic. So maybe you can relate with some of those behaviors, and it's a good opportunity to pay attention there. And really all this fear stuff is about becoming aware of who you are. Okay, so now you may, I mean, if you do this exercise of the tree exercise or recursive exercise, you may realize that there are a lot of fears. I mean, really, there is almost infinite number of fears. So you may wonder, well, if we try to go one by one, this can take forever, no? But again, if you do this exercise, the idea is to pay attention to the fears at the bottom of the tree, because again, you start with the fears at the top, and those fears are based on another fears, and those fears in another fears. And the thing is that if you can overcome the fears at the bottom, this will cascade up and eliminate the fears at the top. And again, also the beliefs, the same with the beliefs. If there are beliefs that there are limiting beliefs that you can modify somehow, then essentially the top of the pyramid will start to crumble and collapse, and that means that the fears will disappear. So so the question here is there is an ultimate fear that is the fear of all fears, that feed all fears? And I think I mentioned it at the beginning, and for me personally, I think that the ultimate fear is the fear of death. But here, not just the physical body, especially if you are young, probably you think you will live forever, so you don't care about you don't think about this, but it's not about the death of the physical body, it's the death of your identity, who you are, and that's what you're afraid of ultimately. And that's why you have all these beliefs that you are so attached to. And again, it's not about, of course we have to believe about something, I mean, to function in this society and in this world. It's not about necessarily about the beliefs. Of course there are beliefs that can be better than others, and values that are better than others, but also it's about the attachment to the beliefs. So that's the problem usually. Again, for example, a lot of vegans have very good intentions and want to help the planet and reduce suffering of animals and whatever, but they are very attached to those beliefs, and that's also not completely healthy. I mean, that creates those problems, because then you get triggered every time someone does not agree with you, and that's perfectly valid. I mean, you may have your reasons, but anyways, so it's not necessarily about the beliefs themselves, but you are attached to them, and that's the problem. I think that attachment also is a very interesting concept. I may talk about this in the future, because it's very related to this. And as you see, I mean, all the videos are pretty much related to one another. So really, here, even though all the videos are about very important principles, but ideally it's about the whole picture. It's about really putting everything together, the ultimate goal here. But this will take time, so take it easy. So as I mentioned, the ultimate root of fear is your identity, and you are afraid of losing it, or to maybe become something different. You really, so I really want to pay attention, like next time you feel triggered about something, that ask yourself what part of me is being triggered. So if you are afraid of being ridiculed, if someone makes a joke on you and you get triggered, you get emotional, you get angry, because I mean, for some jokes you may take it easy and you may laugh, but there may be some jokes that you get uncomfortable. Maybe are jokes about your religion or about your personal stances or whatever, and there are some beliefs that triggers you. So I really want to pay your attention about those. What part of you is being triggered, because that's exactly what you have to look at. And it's not. I don't want you to escape or to try to suppress that. Actually, what I want to do is that you really go deep and see what part of your identity is being triggered, and to really contemplate about this. That's the key here. That's why this is a very it's a process that takes time, and really you need to be seen in your day-to-day life. It's not just about doing theoretical. I mean, the theoretical exercises like this exercise about doing the tree can be quite powerful to uncover a lot of your fears you may not even be aware of. But also your day-to-day life is a great source of inspiration to get. You may notice fears, and a lot of this again is unconscious, or you just ignore it, or you get angry and you may leave whatever. But again, that's one way of handle the situation, just escaping it. But there is another possibility, and it is to try to understand it. So, and there may be situations where you may think, but for example, I don't know, let's say you don't like to be in ridicule, and therefore all your decisions are based upon that. So you may be afraid of making the clown or saying something stupid, and you may say, but isn't everybody afraid of that, of being ridiculed? And no, of course not. I mean, there are people that don't give a damn about making the clown out there. So again, all fears are relative. All fears are relative, even though for you may seem like pretty personal and pretty like everybody should be afraid of that. But again, there will always be someone that doesn't have this fear. So I really want you to pay attention to that. And again, is that, for example, about the fear of being ridiculed? I mean, is that bad? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, okay, your reputation may be in risk at worst, or maybe, I don't know, your friends may leave you. But again, pay attention to two things. First, if you say, I am afraid of losing my friends or losing my reputation. Again, you see that fears are based on other fears. So you see, and also, again, is that so dangerous? Is that so bad? I mean, are you gonna die because of that? So really, even the fears that you may consider that are quite obvious and that everybody has them, pay attention to that, and maybe that's not the case. So again, if let's say you are afraid of losing your friends because you may be attached to them, because maybe you don't have other people to interact with. Maybe they are your only group of friends, and also you may be afraid of being lonely or being bored. So you see, there are fears deep down, and ideally those are the fears you want to tackle, the big deep fears, like fear of being alone. What's so bad of being alone? Why you are so afraid of being alone? So notice that. So uncovering your belief is, as you hopefully you can understand at this point, is crucial, because part of this work is about knowing what your beliefs are, what your values are, and maybe you will discover that some of them are not that good and not helpful to your day-to-day life. And I was thinking yesterday, I think, that today is so easy to have other people implant beliefs on us. I mean, thanks to the internet, YouTube, whatever. We really don't have time to think by ourselves. Like personally, for example, I was pretty I don't know if addicted, but I really had a hard time like not listening to something. I was always, I am self-improvement junkie, so I always want to consume content, always listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook, and I couldn't stop. I mean, I feel something was missing when I was not doing that, and somehow this doesn't let you time to think for yourself, and maybe to pay attention to some beliefs that you may have or some content that you're watching that really is not helping you. But that's a small tangent about your beliefs, because it's really crucial that you understand your beliefs and maybe you realize some of them are not helping you. And you may ask, but if I remove all my fears, will I become reckless? Will I start jumping from the second floor? Of course not. Here is about using your mind. Actually, it's quite the opposite, I think. It's not just, there is a difference between fear and being cautious. I mean, of course, that's on your day-to-day life. You have to pay attention, I know, in the street, for cars, or maybe someone may have bad intentions. It's okay to be cautious and pay attention, but the problem is the fear, and the fear is, in my opinion, unnecessary. Because actually, what happens if you are facing a dangerous situation, because it may happen here and there, you may experience a dangerous situation, and if you are in fear, you will feel paralyzed and you won't be able to do anything. While if you are fully in the present moment, you will be able to use those self-preservation mechanism, this adrenaline, and you will be able to react them, either to run or to whatever. But really, fear is not necessary. This psychological fear that essentially will paralyze you, and that's not what you want if you are facing a dangerous situation, right? So now let's go to the main point and how to overcome our fears. But I want to be clear here that really, almost 40 minutes here, or more than 40 minutes, because we really need to understand what fear is, because ultimately overcoming your fears is about facing them. So that's the solution. But probably you have heard this advice, and I heard this advice many times, and I was like, duh, of course, but how do I do that? And really, I think that understanding how fear works in a deep sense, and I really want you to do this exercise of really paying attention when you are in fear, is a personal investigation that you have to do. This will give you exactly the tools you need, and I think it's a little bit of confidence, because now you know, I hope that at least at theoretical level, that fears are based on your identity. So that's maybe a good thing to have in mind. You may have beliefs that may be stopping you of making changes. And also this mechanism of the mind that has of creating a lot of thought or visualizations, pictures in your mind about all the bad things that can go wrong. Because if you think your mind, I mean, is making a pretty good job, because if your mind is able to stopping you of making something because you're afraid, then that means that it's making the job, right? So it works pretty well. But again, this is a trap. So if you want to overcome your fears, being aware of those mechanisms, I think that's pretty empowering, because if you just listen to the advice of just face your fears, it's like, okay, but how do I do that? I'm afraid, I'm in pain. Now, if you understand how fear works, you have the tools to slay the dragon, in a sense. Because, I mean, essentially fear is just a creation of your mind. It's not real. There's nothing real there. It's just your mind making pictures there. So I think that that's pretty powerful. You can really appreciate and understand this idea that all fears eventually are imaginary. So that's what I want to say, because again, having this understanding, at least next time you are afraid, you will know, oh, okay, yeah, that's my mind making tricks on me, or oh, that's part of my identity that's triggered. I really, eventually, it's all about this awareness of how your mind is working, and that's what we need to really understand. And again, this is a personal work, because your mind and my mind may be quite different. You may have different beliefs and different fears, right? So and of course, all what I'm saying here is false in the sense that this is just theoretical knowledge, and it's important that you put it into practice. Remember, I have this video about stop overthinking and just do it, and there I basically explain why knowing something from theoretical point of view is not enough. You really need, especially here in personal development, we really need to embody the principles, not just knowing them. And I fell into this trap a long time ago, for a long time, and I have all these cool ideas in my mind, but I didn't put into practice. So that's won't help you really to change, and it can be a trap of your mind, because your mind will trick you thinking that you are having all these cool ideas, but if you cannot put into practice, then there's of no value. You're just doing philosophy, right? So, and think of facing your fears as a skill. I really think that's a skill, and for the pointers that I will give you now, it's important that, yeah, don't start with something, again, if you are just level 1, don't start with fears like deep down. Just start with simple fears, and become good at facing those small fears, and you will get more confidence, and you will notice how your mind is working. So this theoretical understanding will become real for you, and then you will be able to tackle more complicated fears. So really think of as a skill over time. And again, this may sound like difficult or painful, and yeah, removing your fears will be a quite painful process, but there is nothing you can do about it. I mean, there is no pill, there is no magic formula, but the rewards, remember at the beginning, you will be able to grow as fast as possible. Literally, if you can overcome your biggest fears in your life, I mean, your life will be so different. I hope that you can visualize this. Whatever fear you have now, imagine if you didn't have it at all, how beautiful your life will be. I mean, really, you will become a different person. And being fearless makes you unstoppable. So let me give you some pointers about how to overcome fear, because so again, start small. In the video about what video? I forgot it. I think it was the video about failure equal improvement, or improvement equals failure. Yeah. I talk about this principle, and maybe I don't know if I should make a video, but really start small is crucial. Again, this is skill, so it's a good idea to start small. So pick fears that are more or less simple, from the more of surface level fears. Don't just jump with I don't know, fear of rejection or fear of failure. Those are pretty deep fears, because otherwise you will get paralyzed and you won't do anything. Okay, so it's important that start small and gain confidence and understand the process. All this theoretical knowledge, again, is just knowledge, so I want you to start small and really put it into practice, and see by yourself how this works, how your mind starts to create those images and these sensations in your body, and think, oh yeah, that's what I remember it from the video. So I start with something that's manageable, and doing I call it the recursion exercise, this exercise of creating the tree, remember, I think that's from again, is more an indirect way, but will uncover your fear. So pick a simple fear to start with, and for this one, think for a moment why you have this fear, and think of all the possible reasons, and those will be either other fear or some belief you may have. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you are afraid of, I don't know, talking to people on the street, if you find someone that you want to talk to and you are afraid, maybe you are afraid because you don't feel you are good enough, or maybe you are afraid of looking weird, or you may believe that you are not interesting, you are not good looking, whatever. So list all the beliefs and all the fears. And for example, here have let's say you are afraid of not expressing your opinions. Okay, so you may realize because you have this fear because you may be scared of something stupid, or believing your ideas are not important. And then you can start to question those beliefs. So why do you think your opinions are not important? And repeat the process with the fears that come up. So for example, in this case, why you're afraid of something stupid, and you may be afraid of that because you don't like to be wrong. That's another fear. You may be afraid of being wrong, or because you may believe you are smart and don't want to be stupid. That's a belief. And so on. So you will have in the end a list of beliefs, and ideally, if you do this exercise, you will end up just with beliefs at the bottom, because again, the beliefs in a sense are the base of yourself, your sense of you, and all the beliefs eventually can be divided into either other fears or beliefs. So you can go pretty deep. So I really encourage you to do this exercise at least once, because it will uncover fears that you may not be aware of, or beliefs you may not be aware of, or that there are like a little bit unconscious there, but you don't think too much about it. So I think that the potential of this exercise is that really it will help you to know yourself better, what your beliefs are, what your values are, who the hell you are, and also to maybe to change some of them, to and therefore avoid some pitfalls. Okay, so I think that's as a sort of self-discovery exercise can be very important, and it's not as scary as just facing your fears. But again, that's the ultimate solution, is facing them. So sorry, I don't have there is no magic pill here. But let me give you some pointers. Remember, start small. And I want you to observe the following. So notice your body sensations and what your mind is doing when you are about to face a fearful situation. So I want to ask yourself, what pictures come to your mind, what images come to your mind, and remember that all those are tricks that your mind's making to keep you as you are. Your mind doesn't want to change it, and it works pretty well if you think about it. So become aware. Remember this point, that your mind is playing tricks on you, so that you really don't have to believe those images. Those images are not you, okay? And the same with the body sensations. Notice, just remember that that's a normal mechanism that your mind is creating. Your mind is pretty powerful, so and it's very useful, but also can be very deceiving. Okay, so pay attention to both. And also, if you are able to face the situation, hopefully, notice how you feel after. Do you still have those images in your mind, or do you feel a sense of relief? Do you feel happy, even though maybe how was the outcome? Was the outcome as your mind was making you to believe, or was better? So you may say, okay, yeah, that's good, but I mean, it's impossible to remove all belief, no? Sorry, not all fears. And the answer is no. There are people out there that don't experience any psychological fear, and you may be one of them if you do the work. And actually, I claim that that's my promise. If you do enough personal development, if you take your time, because this takes time, to personal development, and also conquer your fears along the way, remember that's a skill, you can become fearless one day. But that's something that you have to prove by yourself, and probably you're too lazy for that at this point. Maybe, I mean, most people watching this won't be able to do that because they don't have what it takes. So only some people really have the courage, or maybe you really need to have a pretty bad situation in your life that makes you think like, fuck it, I will do it. Again, fears are relative, so maybe you will need to experience a very painful situation that makes you say, you know what, fuck with all this, and I will do whatever it takes. Maybe that's what you need to, in order to take action in your life. But ultimately, the choice is up to you. Alright, almost an hour. Like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. But I really want you to... This is one of the most important videos, because fear is the ultimate skill you will need to do truly personal development. And I mean, I'm telling you from in a sense a couple of steps ahead, and probably maybe you're not appreciating that. You think this is not that big deal, but really, if you can conquer your fears, you will become invincible. You will be able whatever you want to do. Nobody will be able to stop you, not your friends, your family, nobody. So hopefully you can be wise enough to see ahead and visualize how your life will be if you can take those principles, not only this one, but all the principles from this channel and from the newsletter. Remember to subscribe to it, and your life will become better little by little. You have to be patient, but you will become a completely different person. So that's all for today, and I hope to see you in the next video.